Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating and honestly kind of jarring philosophical essay by Zhu Feng. It asks a pretty blunt question. How does the world actually distribute its energy, its care, and its resources? We all tend to hold on to these idealized notions of fairness, but this essay really forces us to look at the raw, unfiltered mechanics of nature and human behavior. It's a bit of a wild ride, so let's dive right in and challenge some assumptions.
Okay, let's dive into this by setting the scene. The author actually begins with a super peaceful, everyday moment. Just imagine a quiet afternoon. He's kneeling on a mat out in front of some guest rooms, getting his hands dirty in the garden. He's weeding, he's loosening up the soil, fertilizing his Chinese roses. Normal gardening stuff, right? But he pauses to notice something really specific about his own emotional state while doing this chore. The entire process is just filled with this undeniable joy. And why is that? Well, because the roses are already growing vigorously. He finds that simply looking at these flourishing, strong plants naturally sparks this immense joy within him. And because of that joy, he actively wants to weed them, he wants to fertilize them, and he wants to give them even more water.
Now, I want you to reflect on this for a second. Why do we actually prefer the flourishing flower? If you've ever kept houseplants or had a garden or honestly even managed a team of people, you probably recognize this exact feeling. The author realized that tending to the thriving plant brought him this instinctive joy. It absolutely wasn't the struggling, dying weed that commanded his loving attention. It was the plant that was already doing exceptionally well. It's a very natural, almost subconscious human reaction. We are just drawn toward vitality, and we naturally want to invest our energy into things that are already succeeding.
And this brings us to a stark realization. It's really the core paradox of the entire essay. Our moral expectation, the way we're wired to think things should work, is that the weak should get more care and more energy. We kind of figure the strong can just fend for themselves, right? They don't really need our extra effort. But the reality, as the author observes it, is the exact opposite. The strong actually get more care. The weaker something is, the less care and energy it receives. And the stronger something is, the more it just naturally absorbs all that extra energy and attention. It's a complete inversion of what we might typically consider fair or just. Let's move to Section 1, a cruel reality, evidence in society and nature, and see how this builds. So the author takes this little gardening paradox and scales it way up, looking for this pattern everywhere. He's basically asking, is this an inescapable law of nature? And he maps it out across a bunch of different domains. Take politics and business, for example. He notes that the higher an official's rank, the more supporters, flatterers, and gifts they naturally attract. In the business world, the more successful a company is, the more eager banks are to just throw money at them. Financing is incredibly easy compared to some struggling startup begging for a loan. He even looks at human relationships, pointing out that historically, highly capable and handsome men had dozens of wives, while others remained lonely bachelors. And get this, it's not even just humans. He points out that in nature, the drier a place is, the less likely it is to receive rain, whereas already wet climates get the most rainfall. Across the board, the rule seems to be the better it is, the more prosperous, the worse it is, the bleaker.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Saint's Confession, Human Nature Revealed. Here, the author candidly admits that even though he considers himself a highly moral person, a saint, if you will, he is completely hardwired to favor the strong and the beautiful.
And this brilliantly illustrates the point on a macro level when we look at the author's own life. He actually tracks his own global migration to prove this underlying thesis. I mean, look at this timeline. He was a permanent resident of Zimbabwe, but he left. He went to Vanuatu to build a home, but didn't stay there either. He was a Chinese citizen by birth, but ultimately left to go settle down in Canada. Why is he constantly hopping across continents? His conclusion is wonderfully simple and honest. Fundamentally, he is driven to constantly seek out better, stronger, more flourishing living environments. His own major life choices perfectly mirror that exact same energy flow he observed while weeding his garden.
All right, moving on to Section 3, the energy flow diagram, a universal law.
To really tie all these micro and macro observations together into a solid framework, the author turns to a very famous biblical quote from Christ Jesus. It reads, "For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away even that he hath." Now, regardless of your background, you have to admit that perfectly encapsulates the essay's central theme of disproportionate accumulation. It's basically the ultimate ancient articulation of why the strong get stronger and the weak get weaker.
So the crucial point is how we define this.
Jeffin calls it the energy flow diagram. It is this natural mechanism where energy, care, attention, and resources disproportionately flow toward the strong, the beautiful, and the excellent. And at the exact same time, those same resources are naturally diverted away from the weak or the struggling. So whether it's giving extra water to a flourishing rose, banks handing out loans to a booming business, or rainfall pouring down on an already wet climate, the diagram always routes energy toward abundance and away from scarcity. Which leads us to Section 4, Becoming Excellent, the ultimate takeaway.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that while all of this might sound super deterministic or even a bit discouraging at first, it actually leads to a highly empowering conclusion. Because since fighting this natural flow is literally useless, you just have to adapt to it. So, step 1, stop complaining, crying, and shouting about how unfair the world is. Step 2, stop blowing up, throwing tantrums, or just being difficult with other people. The universe simply doesn't care. And step 3, and this is the only real winning move here, make yourself excellent all around. The more excellent you become, the more that energy, care, and resources will just naturally flow right to you. If you choose to remain imperfect or weak, the energy is just going to bypass you entirely.
He wraps up this core message by redefining a phrase I'm sure we've all heard a million times. For the author, this entire cruel but intensely logical energy flow is the true literal meaning behind the saying, God helps those who help themselves. The universe, or the natural order, whatever you want to call it, will only aid you, pour energy into you, and help you flourish once you have actually put in the work to make yourself strong, capable, and excellent in the first place. So we arrive at the end of our explainer with a challenge directly to you. Look at your own life right now and the situations you're facing. Are you wasting your precious energy complaining about the unfairness of it all, basically hyper-focusing on the dying weeds? Or are you taking radical responsibility, striving every single day to make yourself the flourishing rose, knowing that once you actually do, the world's energy will naturally start flowing your way? It's definitely a stark framework, but an undeniably powerful one for personal growth. Keep striving for excellence, and we'll see you in the next explainer.